The train moved, steel wheels grinding, compartment quiet. Miss Marple sat near the corner, knitting needles steady, red wool in her lap. A maid adjusted her suitcase. A colonel tapped his cane. A young clerk shuffled papers. A nervous woman stared at her book. The window rattled. The smell of coal drifted. No one spoke. The guard passed. Shoes clicking. Door latch slid. Compartment sealed. Time crawled. Then a scream. High. Sharp. From the next carriage. 1 second. Then silence. Everyone froze. The colonel gripped his cane. The maid gasped. The clerk dropped his papers. The nervous woman turned pale. Marple did not move. Her eyes lifted from the red wool. She listened. The train slowed. Metal screeched. Guard's voice. "Stay seated," the maid whispered. "What was that?" the colonel muttered. Sounded close. The clerk stammered. "Accident, maybe?" Marple watched them one by one. Small things. The colonel's shoes muddy, though the floor was clean. The clerk's hands shaking too much for spilled ink. The maid's handbag cheap, yet perfume expensive. The woman's book held too tight, pages unread. Details. Always details. The scream echoed again in memory. Not far, not faint. A body near. The guard's steps rushed past. Keys jangled. Doors slammed. Shouts carried. No one leaves. Compartments stayed locked. Tension heavy. Breath loud. Marple leaned back. Her needles clicked once, then stopped. She whispered softly, "One of us knows. One of us hides." The maid shook her head. No, it can't be," the colonel growled. "Don't start guessing, madam." The clerk coughed nervously. The woman looked away. Marple's gaze dropped. Red wool thread dangled from her lap. She twisted it once round her finger. Outside, the whistle blew. Another voice called, "Inspector on board." The colonel straightened. The maid clasped her bag tight. The clerk fumbled his papers again. The nervous woman whispered something under her breath. Marple noted every gesture, every glance, every silence. Because truth always leaks, even in quiet compartments. Another thud sounded. From the corridor. Heavy. Final. The guard opened the door, face pale, voice shaking. "There's been a murder." Everyone gasped. Marple alone stayed calm. She fixed her eyes on the group, then said only one line. "The killer is already here." The inspector entered. Boots heavy, eyes sharp. He shut the door behind him. "Roll call," he barked. No one moved. Miss Marple looked down at her knitting. Red wool steady between her fingers. She waited. Observation before speech. The maid spoke first. "My name is Marianne. I serve Lady Weston." Her voice trembled. She hugged her suitcase close. Cheap leather, strap half torn, perfume on her sleeves too rich for a maid. Her hands carried faint soap burns. Hard work clear. Yet she tried to sit straight, chin high. The colonel cleared his throat. Colonel Arbuthnot, retired. He tapped his cane once. Gold ring on his finger. Jacket neat, but cuffs frayed. Boots muddy, though the carriage floor was clean when they boarded. His eyes did not wander. Fixed, cold, voice clipped, military. Authority laced in every word. The clerk shuffled his papers. Michael Graves, office clerk. He dropped one sheet, bent to snatch it back, sweat already on his brow, nails bitten, collar too tight. His suitcase small, battered, stuffed with loose files, ink stains on his thumb, but his shoes polished bright, oddly careful. The nervous woman lowered her book. "Helen Gray. I teach history." Her tone stiff. Book cover neat, but edges clean like never read. She gripped it too tight, knuckles white, eyes down. She wore gloves spotless, without wrinkle. Yet a thread clung to her sleeve, bright red. She brushed it off quickly. Marple caught the motion. Her eyes followed that single thread. Her own knitting paused. The inspector nodded at each in turn. His pen scratched, names logged, faces studied. He turned finally to Marple. "And you, madam?" She smiled faintly. "Jane Marple, from Street Mary Mead." Her voice calm, almost kind. She said no more. Needles clicked again. The inspector studied her, then dismissed. To him, she was just an old woman with yarn, but she had seen them all. The maid's cheap bag and costly perfume, the colonel's mud and rigid stance, the clerk's sweat and false polish, the teacher's red thread and unread book, and silence louder than screams. The guard leaned in. "Body's in the next carriage, young woman." Strangled. He swallowed hard. Compartment locked from outside. Key never used. Everyone stiffened. Eyes darted. Hands clenched. The colonel muttered, "Locked doors don't kill by themselves." The maid whispered, "Someone had to touch her." The clerk stammered, "But who? When?" Helen pressed the book flat against her lap. Her lips moved without sound. Marple wound her wool tighter. Knitting paused again, her eyes calm, but sharp. She looked at the scarf around the maid's bag. Frayed edge, red thread. Outside, the inspector raised his voice. "No one leaves until I know the truth." The colonel frowned. The maid's eyes filled with tears. The clerk's papers shook. Helen stared at the floor. Marple whispered under her breath, "They are 5, but only one carries murder." The inspector turned back to the group. "Now, tell me what each of you saw." The train jolted. Metal clashed. Silence cracked. Another scream tore through the corridor. This one sharper, closer, final. The inspector sprang up. "Stay where you are." His hand on the door. He rattled the latch. It held firm, locked tight. The guard's voice shouted from outside. "No one moves. Compartment sealed." The maid shrieked. Hands to her face. Her suitcase slipped to the floor. The colonel barked. "Quiet, girl." He gripped his cane so hard his knuckles turned white. Michael, the clerk, scrambled for his papers. Sheets scattered across the floor. He stuffed them back, fumbling. His hands shook. Sweat dampened his collar. Helen sat frozen. The book flat against her lap. Her lips trembled. Her eyes refused to lift. Not one page turned. Miss Marple sat still. Her knitting rested in her lap. The red wool rolled slightly. She pressed it still with her palm. Her eyes stayed on the others. Another thud echoed in the corridor. A door slammed. Footsteps rushed. Men shouting. The sound of keys jangling. The colonel leaned forward. "What's happening out there?" No answer came. The inspector pressed his ear to the door. He muttered, "Too close. Right next to us." Marianne whimpered, "Please let me out." She tugged the latch. It rattled but held. Her perfume clung in the air, too sweet, too heavy. Michael whispered, "If she's dead, who? Who could do that?" He glanced at each face, then back to the floor. Helen finally spoke. Her voice cracked. "It wasn't me, I swear." No one had accused her yet. The colonel narrowed his eyes. Why say that unless guilty? Her hands clutched the book tighter, gloves spotless. Uncreased. Not the hands of a daily teacher. Marple noticed the detail. Every movement told more than words. The inspector turned. "Everyone calm yourselves." His voice firm. "This is procedure. We hold until I check." He banged the door with his fist. The guard outside shouted back. They found her. "Young lady." Compartment locked. Throat crushed. The maid sobbed louder. Michael flinched. Helen's head dropped. The colonel grunted but said nothing. Miss Marple leaned forward. Her needles tapped once on the table. She whispered almost to herself, "Killed in silence, with no exit. That narrows it." The colonel snapped. "Speak up, woman." She smiled faintly. "I will when it matters." Outside, heavy steps approached again, then a harsh knock. The inspector opened the slot in the door. A pale face of another guard appeared. "She's dead, sir. Strangled." His voice low. "Her name, Clara Barnes." The inspector stiffened. He wrote it down quick, then looked over the compartment. Eyes narrow. "Barnes. Remember it." The colonel muttered. "Never heard of her." Michael stuttered. I don't know her." Marianne shook her head violently. Helen shut her eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Marple watched them, each reaction sharp, each silence sharper. The inspector's voice cut the air. "One of you saw something, and one of you did more than see." The train slowed again. Brakes screeched. Lights flickered. Marple looked at the red thread on her lap, then at the scarf hanging from Marianne's bag. Frayed edge. Same shade. She whispered so soft, only she heard it. "The scarf tells the story." The inspector faced the group, his tone final. "No one leaves this compartment until I have the killer." The inspector straightened. Notebook ready, pen tight in his fist. He pointed at the maid first. "Your name again?" "Marianne, sir." Her voice broke. She hugged her suitcase closer. The inspector leaned in. "Did you know the victim?" Marianne shook her head fast. "No, never seen her." Her perfume filled the space again, too fine for her dress. Marple caught the clash. Cheap cloth, rich scent. The inspector tapped his pen. "Where were you when the scream came?" Marianne whispered. "Here. Always here." She rubbed her hands together. Soap burns showed white against her skin. Hard hands. Nervous hands. The colonel shifted. Kane struck the floor. "My turn?" he asked coldly. The inspector nodded. "Colonel Arbuthnot. Retired." His voice clipped. "Military?" Sharp. "Did you know Clara Barnes?" The colonel frowned. "Never, and I resent the question." His ring flashed as his hand tightened, boots still streaked with mud. Too much mud for a sealed ride. Marple watched. He avoided everyone's eyes, his back stiff. Too stiff. The inspector moved to Michael. The clerk dropped another sheet, fumbled to pick it up. "Michael Graves, office clerk." His voice cracked halfway. "Did you know the woman?" Michael stammered. No, sir." But his papers betrayed him. One corner bore her name scribbled. Clara Barnes. Written, then crossed out. The inspector caught it. "What is this?" Michael sweated harder. "Nothing. Just a note. A mistake." Hands shook too much for simple ink. Marple's eyes narrowed. Mistakes speak louder than words. Now the inspector turned to Helen. She kept her book shut. Helen Gray, teacher. Her lips thin, her tone flat. "No Clara Barnes?" Helen shook her head, but her gloves betrayed her. Spotless. Too spotless. Not worn by working hands. The inspector pointed at the book. "You been reading?" Helen nodded, but Marple noticed. Pages uncreased. Cover stiff. No reading at all. Helen pressed it tighter. Eyes down. Her whole body stiff. Fear lived there, not just shock. Finally, the inspector turned to Marple. "And you, madam?" She smiled gently. "Jane Marple, Street Mary Mead." No fear in her voice. No hurry. Only calm. "Did you know her?" Marple shook her head. "No, but I know patterns." She tapped her needles once. The red wool hung loose. The inspector frowned. "Patterns?" She said no more, only watched. The guard banged on the door. Urgent. Sir, the body's been checked. No hatpin wound. She was strangled. Everyone jolted. Marianne gasped. The colonel muttered something low. Michael froze. Helen clutched the book tighter. Marple's gaze dropped to the maid's scarf. Frayed edge. Thread missing. Red, same as her knitting. She whispered, barely audible. The scarf ties this together. The inspector's eyes narrowed. Someone in this room lied. The inspector leaned forward. Report says strangled. But what about the weapon? Marianne gasped, her eyes wide. I saw something, I swear it. The colonel turned. What did you see, girl? She stammered. A flash. Long, thin, like a pin. Her hands trembled as she shaped the length. A hat. Pin. Sharp. It glittered. Michael leaned in fast. Yes. Yes. That makes sense. Women wear them. Easy to hide. Easy to stab. Helen clutched her book tighter. Her lips pressed thin. She did not speak. The inspector's pen scratched. A hatpin. That would pierce deep. Could kill quick. He nodded once. Reasonable theory. The colonel agreed. Efficient. Silent. A lady's weapon. His cane struck the floor. Fits the scream. Fits the shock. Marianne nodded eagerly, her perfume still strong, her eyes darting. I'm not lying. I saw the glint. Michael whispered. If it was a pin, then any of them could hide it. In a sleeve. In a bag. Helen spoke at last, her voice low. Not me. I have none. She held up her gloves. Empty. Clean. Too clean. The inspector scribbled again. So, hatpin. Motive unclear, but method neat. Marple did not speak. Her eyes lowered to the knitting in her lap. The red wool thread coiled loose. Her fingers traced it. She raised her head slowly, her gaze calm. No. The inspector frowned. No? Marple's voice stayed soft. A hat pin leaves a hole. Sharp. Small. Traceable. Her eyes moved to the group. There was no hole. The colonel scoffed. You heard the girl. She saw it. Marple shook her head. She saw fear. She saw movement. The mind fills gaps. Marianne's face flushed. I swear it was real. Marple's voice firm now. You saw a glint. Perhaps metal. Perhaps light. Not death. Michael frowned. Then how? Marple cut him off. Her throat was crushed, not pierced. The inspector leaned back. His pen paused. Then what was it? Marple looked down again. Her needles clicked once. The wool tightened round her finger. She whispered so only the inspector heard. Cloth, not steel. The inspector stared. Explain. She did not answer. Not yet. Her eyes lifted, scanning the scarf tied on Marianne's bag. Frayed. Edge torn. Thread missing. The train lurched. Everyone shifted. The scarf slipped slightly. The red thread dangled. Marple's voice carried clear this time. It was not a pin. The compartment froze. The inspector leaned forward. Then what killed her, Miss Marple? The inspector's eyes narrowed. Not a pin, you say? Then what? Marple said nothing. Her gaze shifted to the floor. A small glint caught her eye. She bent slowly, fingers delicate. She picked it up, a safety pin. Bent, distorted, metal weak from strain. She turned it between her fingers. The colonel frowned. What of it? A pin is nothing. Marple shook her head. Not this pin. It broke in struggle. Marianne whispered, I've never seen it. Her hands clutched her bag tighter. The scarf slipped lower, frayed edge plain to see. Marple placed the bent pin on the table. Her eyes moved again. this time to the seat beside the clerk. A tiny red thread clung to the cushion. She plucked it free, held it against her own wool. Same shade, same twist. Michael swallowed hard. I don't know how that got there. His voice cracked. Sweat shone on his brow. The inspector scribbled notes. Bent pin. Red thread. Go on. Marple leaned closer to the cushion. Something else. Half, hidden. She eased it out. A torn ticket corner. Crumpled. Jagged edge. Helen gasped softly. She turned her book over, pressed it hard against her lap. Too hard. Pages stiff, as though hiding something. Marple slipped the torn piece into her knitting bag. She said nothing yet. Her gaze rose again, this time toward Marianne. Perfume hung thick around her, sickly sweet. But her bag was cheap leather, her dress plain, worn, her shoes scuffed. Perfume did not match the rest. Marple spoke at last. Perfume lies. Fabric tells truth. The colonel barked. Speak plain, woman. She looked at him calmly. Someone pulled a scarf tight. Someone tore it. Someone bent a pin trying to fix it. And in the struggle, a thread was left behind. Marianne shook her head furiously. It wasn't me. Her eyes wide. Her suitcase rattled as she pulled it closer. Michael stammered, I couldn't. His hands still shook. The torn ticket fragment weighed heavy in Marple's bag. The inspector leaned closer. So which of them? Marple wound the red wool round her finger. Tighter, her eyes steady. Look not at who screams loudest. Look at who says least. Helen shifted uneasily. Her gloves too spotless. Her face pale. Her book unopened, still. The colonel tapped his cane hard. Enough riddles. Who strangled the girl? Marple's knitting needles clicked once, then stopped. Her words cut the silence. The scarf holds the answer, and it belongs to one of us. The inspector turned to Michael. You next. Explain yourself. Michael swallowed, his collar damp with sweat. Hands clutched the messy bundle of papers. I told you already, he stammered. I don't know her. I've never met her. The inspector's eyes narrowed. Then why is her name here? He yanked one paper free. The ink scrawl visible. Clara Barnes. Written once. Crossed out. Michael froze. That's nothing. A mistake. His voice cracked. Marple leaned forward. Her needles rested in her lap. Her calm voice cut through. Mistakes do not write full names. Michael's face paled. His eyes darted to the floor. He wiped his hands on his trousers. Sweat smeared the ink further. Marianne gasped. You knew her then? Her tone accusing. Her suitcase rattled as she pulled it close. The colonel snorted. Clerks. Always keeping secrets. Always scribbling lies. He gripped his cane harder. Michael shook his head wildly. No. You're wrong. I didn't kill her. The inspector's voice hardened. Then why cross out her name? Speak clearly. Michael stammered. I was asked to file reports. One mentioned her name. I wrote it down by accident. Then I realized it was out of place, so I crossed it out. That's all. His words tumbled too fast. Too rehearsed. Too desperate. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on him. Truth shakes less than lies. She picked up the red thread again, let it dangle between her fingers. Michael looked at it, then looked away quickly. The inspector pressed on. When did you last leave your seat? Michael hesitated. Never. I stayed here the whole time. The inspector tapped the torn ticket corner, now resting in his notebook. Strange, because this piece doesn't match any of the others. Someone moved. Someone lied. Michael's hands trembled. I don't know how that got there. His voice a whisper. Helen's eyes flicked toward him, then away, silent, her book still tight against her lap. The colonel muttered. He's guilty. Look at him, frightened like a rat. But Marple shook her head slowly. Fear does not always mean guilt. Sometimes it hides something else. Michael's breath came fast. I swear I didn't touch her. I couldn't. Tears welled in his eyes. The inspector slammed the table. Then prove it. Give me one reason to believe you. Michael opened his mouth. No words came. Marple's eyes narrowed. She whispered, "Because the real clue is not ink. It is fabric." The compartment fell, silent. Every eye turned to her. The inspector shifted his attention. "Colonel Arbuthnot, your turn." The old soldier lifted his chin, voice steady. "Ask quickly. I've nothing to hide." Marple's eyes moved first to his boots. Dark mud clung thick to the edges, not the thin dust of a train floor. Heavy earth, fresh. The inspector noticed it too. Strange. You said you never left the compartment. The colonel's jaw tightened. I did not. His cane struck the ground once. Sharp, loud. The inspector bent, touched the cane tip. Metal scraped. The end bent slightly. Not from age, from force. Odd wear, the inspector muttered. An old cane shows polish, not dents. The colonel's lips thinned. I walk hard. That is all. Marianne whispered. It looks broken. The colonel glared. Mind yourself, girl. His fist clenched round the handle. Michael leaned forward nervously. He seems too calm, too certain. His papers shook in his hands. The colonel snapped. Unlike you, boy, I control myself. Helen finally looked up from her book. Her eyes flicked to his boots. Then away again, her voice quiet. You did leave, didn't you? The colonel's face darkened. Be careful what you suggest. The inspector tapped his notebook. Where did you step in mud, Colonel? This train hasn't stopped since London. No answer, only silence. Marple's voice came soft. The platform at departure was dry, the ground firm, no rain in days. Her knitting needles paused, her eyes fixed on the boots. That mud came later, somewhere not in sight. The colonel leaned forward. You call me a liar, madam. His voice dangerous now. Marple smiled faintly. I only state what the earth states. The inspector pressed again. Explain the mud. Explain the cane. The colonel's hand shook slightly. He covered it by striking the cane once more. But the tremor showed. Marianne gasped. You did it. You killed her. Her words too fast, too eager. The inspector raised his hand. Quiet. His eyes stayed on the colonel. I need the truth. The colonel breathed hard, shoulders stiff. I served my country 30 years. I do not strangle women. Marple leaned back, her voice calm as ever. Pride speaks loud, but mud speaks louder. The inspector wrote quickly. Boots muddy, cane dented, alibi weak. He shut his notebook with a snap. Michael whispered, Then it's him. Helen shook her head. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She stared at her gloves, silent. The colonel's eyes darted to her, only for a second, then back to the inspector. Marple caught it. She whispered softly. His glance betrays him. The inspector leaned in. Colonel Arbuthnot, until proven otherwise, you are my chief suspect. The colonel gripped his cane tighter, knuckles white, voice low. You are making a grave mistake. Marple's needles clicked once, then stopped, her words clear. No, the grave has already been made. The inspector turned back to Marianne. You, speak clearly now. What did you see? Marianne hugged her suitcase, eyes wet. I saw nothing, truly. I was scared. I stayed in my seat. The inspector frowned. Nothing at all? No sound? No movement? She shook her head. I heard the scream, like all of us, but I never moved. Marple's eyes dropped to the scarf hanging from her bag. Frayed edge, thread loose, red, same as the wool in her lap. Marple spoke softly. Where did you get that scarf, child? Marianne blinked. My scarf? It's mine. Why? She clutched it closer. Marple reached out and touched the frayed edge. The loose thread slid free. She held it against her knitting wool. Perfect match. Michael gasped. It's the same thread. The colonel grunted. Fabric proves nothing. Threads tangle everywhere. Helen's eyes flicked to the scarf. Her lips pressed tighter. Still silent. The inspector leaned forward. Answer her, girl. Where did you get that scarf? Marianne trembled. I told you it's mine. I've had it for months. Marple's gaze sharpened. Then why is the weave fresh? Why is the pin bent where it was fastened? Why do I see a stitch made in haste? Marianne's eyes widened. I don't know what you mean. Her voice cracked. She held the scarf tighter, almost hiding it inside her coat. Marple did not stop. That scarf was used in struggle. Fabric torn, thread pulled, a safety pin bent in panic to hold it again. Michael whispered, She's guilty. Look at her. Marianne shook her head violently. No, I never touched that woman. I never left my seat. The inspector slammed the table. Then explain the thread left on the seat beside her. Explain the bent pin underfoot. Marianne sobbed. Tears spilled. I don't know. I swear I don't know. The colonel muttered under his breath. Servants always hide things, always covering for others. Helen flinched at his words. Her eyes dropped back to her gloves. She whispered something too low to catch. Marple leaned closer to Marianne, her tone calm. Lies unravel as quick as stitches. If the scarf is yours, prove it. Marianne froze. Her hands gripped the cloth tighter, her knuckles white. She could not speak. The inspector's pen scratched. Scarf, thread, pin, recorded. He shut the notebook. Until proven otherwise, you stand close to guilt. Marianne cried louder. I didn't. Please believe me. Marple watched quietly. Her needles rested still. Her eyes shifted not to Marianne, but to Helen. Helen's hands clenched over the book. A faint tremor betrayed her. Marple whispered to herself. The scarf hides more than one story. The inspector turned to Helen. You've been silent too long. Time for answers. Helen pressed the bizzard, book flat on her lap. Her gloves neat, spotless, her eyes down. I have nothing to tell, she whispered, her voice thin, almost broken. The inspector frowned. You heard the scream. What did you see? Helen shook her head. I saw nothing. I stayed here. Michael muttered. That's what they all say. His papers rattled again. The colonel leaned forward. Speak up, woman. Your silence condemns you. Helen flinched. Her hands tightened on the book. Too tight. The cover bent. Marple noticed. Not a crease on the pages. Not one mark of use. Yet the binding strained. She spoke gently. May I see your book, dear? Helen's face turned pale. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She shook her head slowly. It's mine. Just mine. The inspector reached out. Hand it over. Helen hesitated, then surrendered it. Her hands shook as she let go. The inspector opened the cover. He frowned. The pages hollowed inside. Not words, not print. An empty space carved deep. Inside lay a folded paper, old, yellowed, tucked flat against the back. The inspector pulled it free, unfolded it. His eyes scanned fast, then stopped. Marple asked softly, What does it say? The inspector read aloud. "Dearest Clara, forgive me, Helen." Marianne gasped. "Her name. It's her name." Michael stared wide. "You knew the victim. You lied." The colonel's eyes narrowed. "So, not just a teacher, but blood in the matter." Helen's lips trembled, tears welled. "Yes, she was my sister, half-sister, Clara Barnes." Silence fell. Even the train wheels seemed quieter. The inspector spoke firm. "You hid this letter. You denied knowing her." "Why?" Helen sobbed. "She wanted money. I had none. She threatened to expose family secrets. I followed her here to plead, to stop her, but I didn't kill her. I couldn't." Marple's gaze sharpened. Her words, soft but steady. "You carried the book, hollowed out. You carried the letter hidden. You sat silent while her body lay steps away." Helen cried harder. "I only wanted to talk, to reason with her." Michael muttered. "Convenient excuse." The colonel grunted. "Weak. She's guilty." Marianne sobbed louder, clutching her scarf. The inspector raised his hand. "Enough. Helen, you had motive. You had contact. You had opportunity." Helen shook her head furiously. "No, I swear. I never touched her. I never left my seat." Marple's eyes lingered on the hollow book, on the empty space where more could have been hidden. Her voice low. "But what else did you carry, Miss Grey?" Helen froze, her breath shallow. The inspector snapped his notebook shut. "You'll explain every detail at once, or I'll assume the worst." Helen wiped her eyes. Tears streaked her cheeks. Her voice cracked. "Yes, she was my sister, Clara Barnes. My blood." The inspector leaned close. "You lied." "Why?" Helen shivered. "Because shame clings. Clara was born outside marriage. My father tried to hide it. My mother hated it. I carried the stain. Always the stain." The colonel grunted. "Family scandal. Old as time. But still no reason to strangle her." Helen shook her head fast. "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Her gloves twisted in her hands. Her book trembled in her lap. Marple studied her quietly. "You carried her letter. Hidden. You followed her train. You watched her. Why?" Helen's eyes shut tight. "She demanded money. She wanted me to pay, or she would shout our shame. I couldn't let the world know. I begged her to stop." Michael leaned forward. "You argued with her?" "Yes," Helen whispered. "But not today. Not in this carriage. I only meant to plead, never to kill." Marianne muttered. "Sisters fight. Sisters betray. Maybe sisters kill too." Helen shot her a sharp look. "Not me. I wanted peace. Clara wouldn't listen. But I never harmed her." The inspector opened the letter again. "Forgive me. Signed by you. Why write it?" Helen sniffed. "She asked for it. Proof she had me in her hands. She wanted to show it around. To blackmail me. I wrote it, hoping she would stop there." The colonel scoffed. "Naive. Blackmail never stops." Helen's voice rose. "I know. That's why I followed her. To beg her not to ruin us. But she was alive when I sat down. She never even looked at me here." Marple's voice soft, steady. "You lied because truth cuts deeper than knives." Helen sobbed louder. "Yes, I lied. But I didn't strangle her. I couldn't. I loved her still, even in anger." Michael's voice shook. "You loved her, yet you hid her letter. You denied her name. That's guilt." Helen shook her head hard. "No, that's fear. I feared disgrace more than death, but I am no killer." Marple's eyes moved to the hollow book. Empty space. Too much room. Her voice calm. "What else was hidden, Helen?" The scarf? The pin? The ticket? Helen froze. Breath quickened. Her gloves clenched tighter. No, nothing else. Only the letter. The inspector slammed the table. You had motive. You had means. You lied already. Why should I believe you now? Helen stared down. Her tears fell on the hollow book. She whispered broken words. Because I was too afraid to even touch her. Silence pressed the compartment. The train wheels clattered. Outside, the guards shouted orders. Inside, every eye burned into Helen. Marple's knitting stilled. Her voice clear. She is guilty of secrets. Not yet of murder. The colonel barked. Then who is? Marple's gaze drifted slowly. To the cane. To the boots. To the stiff soldier. She whispered so only the inspector heard. The mud answers louder than her tears. The inspector tapped his pen. Enough of sisters and letters. Another thread runs here, a darker one. He turned toward the clerk's bundle again. One folder stuck out, marked with a doctor's name. Fenwick. The inspector pulled it free. Why do you carry this file? Michael stuttered. I handle records. I file what I'm told. Nothing more. The inspector flipped the pages. Prescriptions, signatures, dates, some forged. Marple leaned closer. Forgery stains ink differently. See the strokes? Hesitant. Pressed too hard. A real doctor writes quicker. The colonel frowned. What is this to do with us? The inspector read aloud. Dr. Fenwick, suspended 5 years ago, accused of selling prescriptions, acquitted for lack of proof. But the scandal lingered. Marianne gasped. My lady spoke of him once, said he ruined families. Helen's eyes widened. Clara knew him. She said she had papers that would destroy him. She wanted to use them. The inspector snapped the file shut. So Clara was blackmailing not only you, Helen, but a doctor as well, Michael whispered. That's why her name was written down. I was told to deliver these papers to the inspector in York. I never read them, I swear. The colonel muttered, always a blackmailer, this Clara. She made enemies. Enemies kill. Helen shook her head. She wanted money, but she also wanted revenge. She said Fenwick deserved ruin. Marple's voice came calm. And now she lies dead before she could ruin anyone. The inspector's tone hardened. Fenwick had reason to silence her. He had reason to fear exposure. If these records are true, he risked prison. Marianne trembled. But Fenwick wasn't here. He wasn't in this carriage. Marple corrected softly. His name travels with his sins. Old scandals do not stay buried. They pull others down. Michael nodded quickly. I only carried the papers. Nothing else. Nothing more. But his face still pale. His hands shook. The inspector leaned back. So Clara tied to Fenwick. Clara tied to Helen. Clara tied to someone else with stronger hands. The colonel gripped his cane tighter. His boots pressed harder on the floor. His jaw locked. Marple watched him, calm, patient. Her needles rested still. The past creeps forward. Fenwick's scandal may point wider, but the method does not match his hand. Helen looked at her quickly. You mean he didn't kill her? Marple's gaze stayed on the colonel. Fenwick was many things, but he was not on this train. The inspector slammed the file shut again. Still, this proves motive ran wide. Clara had too many enemies, and one of them sits here. The colonel's eyes flashed. Be careful with your words, sir. Marple's eyes dropped once more to the mud on his boots. Her voice soft. The earth clings to those who walk in shadows. The inspector leaned forward. Then the question remains. Did he carry only mud or murder as well? The inspector slapped the file down. Fenwick, the motive is clear. Forged prescriptions. Blackmail. Reputation on the line. Michael nodded quickly. Yes, it must be him. Clara said his name often. She wanted to ruin him. He had every reason to silence her. Marianne whispered, but he wasn't here, was he? The inspector ignored her. Maybe he boarded quietly. Maybe he bribed a guard. A doctor knows how to kill. A scarf. A pin, he could do it. Helen shook her head. No, he wasn't here. I saw every face. He wasn't among us. The colonel muttered. Men like Fenwick use others. Hire hands. Pay servants. That's how such work is done. His gaze cut toward Marianne. She flinched. The inspector pointed at the bent pin. Could be planted. Could be his tool. He looked around the compartment. All of you may be his accomplices. Marple's voice broke the noise. Calm. Steady. No. The inspector turned sharply. No? Marple lifted the scarf edge from Marianne's bag. She tugged the frayed thread, held it in the light. Fenwick forged papers. He wrote false prescriptions, but he was not here to tear cloth. Michael stammered. But the motive... Motive is nothing without method, Marple cut in. The inspector frowned. Explain. Marple's eyes narrowed. The body bore no puncture, no poison, no needle mark, only bruises. Thumb-shaped, pressed deep into the throat. Fenwick kills with ink, not with hands. Silence. Everyone shifted. The colonel's grip tightened on his cane. Helen stared at her gloves. Marianne clutched her suitcase as if it could shield her. Michael sweated more. The inspector leaned forward. You say he couldn't. Then who did? Marple's knitting needles clicked once, then stopped. Her words quiet. The one who had strength, the one who carried mud, the one whose cane strikes harder than his words. All eyes turned slowly to the colonel. He sneered. You dare accuse me? A soldier? A man of honor? Marple's gaze stayed fixed. Honor does not bend pins. Honor does not leave threads. Pride does. Michael whispered. It was him, all along. Marianne gasped. No, no. It can't. Helen shut her eyes. Her lips moved soundlessly. The inspector tapped his notebook. Colonel Arbuthnot. Motive uncertain, but method fits, means fits, and your boots tell their own tale. The colonel slammed his cane to the floor. Enough of this farce. His face red. Hands trembling. Marple leaned closer. Her tone still calm. You can rage, but the mud will not wash away. The inspector rose. Colonel, you will answer for this at once. The colonel's eyes blazed. I'll answer nothing, and you'll regret this. The inspector steadied his voice. Show me that scarf. Marianne clutched it tighter. No, it's mine. Marple extended her hand. Let her see it, child. Truth cannot stay hidden forever. Slowly, the maid loosened her grip. The scarf slipped free. Frayed. Edge. Loose stitches. Bent pin still holding one corner. Marple laid it flat on the table. Her eyes scanned the weave. One side stretched. Threads torn. Fabric strained beyond repair. She touched the bent pin. It wobbled in place. See this? It was forced back in haste. Used not for fashion, but for pressure. Michael leaned forward. Pressure? Marple nodded. Yes. Cloth pulled tight across the throat. The scarf strangled Clara Barnes. Not steel, not poison. Cloth. Helen gasped. Her gloved hands shook. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. I swear, I didn't. The inspector's eyes narrowed. Then who used it? Marple lifted the scarf again. She pointed at the tear near the knot. Struggle. She fought. Nails pulled the weave. That's why this thread was left on the seat. Michael whispered. And the pin? Marple held it up. Fastened to keep the scarf closed. During the fight, it bent. When he pulled harder, the pin snapped sideways. The colonel barked. This is nonsense. A woman could have done it. Marple's eyes cut to him. No, these bruises thumb-shaped. Deep, strong hands only. A soldier's hands. Not a maid's, not a clerk's. A soldier's. The inspector scribbled quick. Strangled with scarf. Evidence plain. Pin, thread, weave, bruise. It fits. Helen's voice cracked. Then it wasn't me. It wasn't Michael. It wasn't Marianne. Marple's gaze sharpened. Her words slow. The scarf belongs to one, but the force came from another. Marianne shook her head desperately. No, I never gave it. I never... The inspector cut her off. Enough. This scarf is the weapon, and it will hang its owner's name. Marple leaned back. Her needles tapped once against the table. Her voice low, certain. The cloth strangles more than the victim. It strangles the killer's lies, too. The colonel's face stiffened. His hand gripped the cane until it shook. The inspector turned to him sharply. Colonel Arbuthnot, explain why this scarf bears your strength. The inspector stood tall. Colonel, the scarf shows force. Force you alone possess. The colonel's jaw locked. I deny it. Utterly. Marple's gaze lowered to his boots. Mud still thick. Not dried. Fresh earth clung to the edges. She spoke calm. You said you never left your seat, yet mud marks every step. How can that be? The colonel gripped his cane, struck it once on the floor. Do not twist my words. I bored it clean. The mud is old. The inspector shook his head. No, fresh mud. From outside. From the siding where the train slowed. Marianne gasped. You left? When the scream came? The colonel glared. Silence, girl. Michael whispered. His cane. Look at the tip. All eyes turned. The inspector lifted it. Metal bent. Not smooth. Not old. Struck hard against stone or flesh. Explain this, the inspector demanded. Simple wear, the colonel said sharply, but sweat touched his brow now. Helen's voice wavered. He looked calm. Too calm. When the scream came, the colonel turned to her. Careful. Words can wound. Marple's needles rested in her lap, her eyes unblinking. You carry pride, Colonel, pride and temper, and both kill quicker than steel. The inspector wrote fast. Boots. Cane. Strength. Motive unclear, but evidence mounting. Marianne cried out. He frightened me. Even before the scream. I saw him glance at her scarf. Michael nodded. I thought it nothing. But now it fits. The colonel slammed his fist on the table. You fools. I served my country with honor. I do not strangle women. Marple's voice cut through his rage. Yet the bruises match your grip. Wide hands, heavy thumb, a soldier's mark. The inspector snapped his notebook shut. Colonel Arbuthnot, you stand closest to guilt. The colonel rose halfway, his face red, his chest heaving. I will not sit here and be insulted. The guard outside banged the door. Sir, orders from the next station. Hold all suspects. The inspector pointed his pen. Sit down, Colonel, or I'll have you bound. For a moment the colonel froze, eyes darting, hands trembling. Then slowly he sat back down. Marple's gaze stayed fixed on him. She whispered so all could hear. The scarf is not done speaking. It will name its master. The colonel's fists clenched, his silence louder than denial. The inspector's tone hardened. Colonel Arbuthnot, the evidence points at you. Explain yourself. The colonel's face darkened. I owe no explanation. My record speaks for me. Marple's eyes narrowed. Records do not strangle women. Hands do. He turned sharply. You accuse me? An old woman? You dare? Her voice stayed calm. I do not accuse. I observe. And what I observe condemns you. The colonel rose to his feet, cane in hand, chest heaving. His boots scraped the floor, leaving flecks of mud. The inspector barked, "Sit down," but the colonel did not move. His eyes burned. Marianne whimpered, "He'll strike us next." She pulled her suitcase to her chest. Michael pressed against the wall. Sweat rolled down his temple. "He's losing control." Helen clutched her gloves, whispered under her breath. He looked at Clara that way too. Cold. Final. The colonel slammed his cane down. "Enough. You twist every glance, every step, every mark of mud into guilt. I will not endure it." The inspector stepped forward. "You'll endure until I say otherwise. Sit down, or I'll have you restrained." The colonel's grip tightened. His voice cracked with fury. "I will not sit like a criminal. I am no killer." Marple's eyes stayed locked on him. Her words sharp. "Then why does the scarf bear your strength? Why do the bruises echo your hands? Why does your calm mask tremble? Now?" Silence. Thick, heavy. The colonel's face flushed red. His lips parted. No words came. Marple leaned forward. "You left your seat. You stepped into mud. You returned with calm too heavy to be natural. You struck with pride, not purpose. She threatened something you would never allow." The colonel's hand trembled. He dropped the cane. It clattered loud against the floor. Everyone flinched. Marianne sobbed. Michael stared wide-eyed. Helen shut her eyes tight. The inspector barked, "Confess it, Colonel. Save what honor you have left." The colonel sank slowly back into his seat, his voice low, shaking. I only meant to silence her. She would not stop. She taunted me. She mocked my service, my pride. I lost myself." The inspector pressed. "You tightened the scarf?" The colonel's hands shook. "Yes, I pulled. Just for a moment, but when I let go, she was gone." Gasps filled the compartment. Marianne cried louder. Michael whispered, "He admits it." Marple's eyes stayed sharp. Her needles tapped once, her words calm. "He admits part, not all. There is still more buried." The inspector turned fast. "What do you mean?" Marple looked at Helen, then back at the colonel, her voice quiet. "This story has another hand in it." The inspector opened his notebook. "Say it clearly, Colonel." Every word. The colonel sat heavy, shoulders bent, hands shaking, his voice rough. "She mocked me, said my service was worthless, said I was a relic. She laughed. I felt fire in my chest. I grabbed the scarf. I pulled. Only for a moment. Then silence. Marianne sobbed. "You killed her," Michael whispered. "It was him all along." His papers slipped from his lap. He didn't pick them up. Helen's face turned pale. Her gloved hands clenched tighter. "She was cruel, but she was still my sister." The inspector wrote fast. "Method clear, motive pride. Confession partiale." He looked up. "You will answer for this in court." The colonel's eyes burned. "I regret nothing. Weakness deserves silence. She threatened my name, my honor. I could not allow it." Marple shook her head, her voice calm. "Honor does not survive in lies. It dies with them." The inspector snapped the notebook shut. "Guard, prepare restraints." Steps clanged in the corridor. The door opened. 2 guards entered, ropes ready. Marianne turned away, her face wet with tears. Michael kept his eyes on the floor. Helen stared blankly at her hollow book. The colonel lifted his hands slowly. "Bind me, then. My fight is over." His tone bitter. His cane lay forgotten on the floor. The guards tied his wrists. The rope cut into his skin. Still he did not resist. The inspector nodded once. Case closed. But Marple did not move. Her knitting rested still, Her eyes remained sharp. No, not yet. The inspector frowned. What more is there? He confessed. Marple's gaze shifted to Helen, her voice steady. He confessed to anger, to pulling a scarf, but he did not act alone. Helen flinched. Her gloves trembled. Her lips parted, but no words came. The colonel turned his head slowly. His eyes met hers. A flicker passed between them. Recognition. Marianne gasped. Michael looked up suddenly. What? What does that mean? The inspector narrowed his eyes. Are you saying another hand shares guilt? Marple's needles clicked once, then stopped. She spoke firm. Yes, the truth is wider. The scarf tells one story, but silence hides another. The colonel muttered low. Best leave it, old woman. Marple did not blink, her voice cold. I never leave a thread hanging. The inspector leaned forward. Who else, Miss Marple? Who else touched death that night? The inspector's pen hovered. Name them, Miss Marple. Who else? Marple folded her knitting, her eyes calm, her voice steady. Another hand touched this crime, not to strangle, to hide. The inspector frowned. Explain. Marple looked at Helen. You carried the hollow book. You hid the letter. You lied about her name. Not to kill, but to bury shame. Your silence fed her death. Helen trembled. Tears spilled. I wanted to protect myself, protect our family. I feared exposure more than anything. But I didn't kill her. I swear it. The colonel spat bitterly. She pushed too far, she taunted. I lost my temper. But I would not have been cornered if you had spoken truth earlier. Helen lowered her head. I share blame, not guilt. The inspector wrote fast. Complicity noted. Primary killer, Colonel. Secondary, Helen, for concealment. Marianne sobbed quietly. Her scarf lay on the table, frayed, torn. She whispered, Why drag me in? I was only a servant. Marple's gaze turned to her. You lied about the scarf. You patched it in haste. You hid its damage. Fear makes liars, not killers. But your fear delayed truth. Michael looked pale. He cleared his throat weakly. And me? I only carried papers. Marple studied him. You wrote her name, crossed it out, not guilt. But you feared being linked. Fear again. Guilt by silence. The inspector closed his notebook. All tangled, yet the rope lies on one man's neck. The guards tightened the bindings. The colonel did not resist. His eyes stayed hard. I accept it. Pride stands even in chains. Helen turned away, sobbing. Marianne clutched her suitcase. Michael buried his face in his papers. The inspector sighed. Miss Marple, your logic solved what force could not. She shook her head gently. Logic only untangles. But human pride, fear, and shame wove the knot. The train slowed. Station lights flickered through the window. The guard's voice rang out. York approaching. The inspector rose. Justice will board here. We'll deliver him to the law. The guards pulled the Misewell, colonel to his feet. He walked stiff, unbowed, chains rattling with each step. Helen whispered, I'll live with this shadow forever. Marple answered softly. Shadows fade, but habits remain. Pride kills. Lies wound. Secrets choke. Marianne asked timidly, Will it end now, miss? Marple looked at the frayed scarf once more. Her eyes lingered. Her voice quiet. No. Threads travel further than we think. She tucked her knitting away. The red wool rolled loose, then stopped at her shoe. The inspector frowned. Something unsettles you still? Marple nodded faintly. One detail. The ticket stub. Torn too clean. Someone else handled it. Someone not yet named. Silence. Cold. Heavy. The train screeched into the station. Doors clattered open. Steps thundered on the platform. Marple's words hung in the air. One more truth waits, and it will not stay hidden long. The inspector's pen hovered. Name them, Miss Marple. Who else? Marple folded her knitting, her eyes calm, her voice steady. Another hand touched this crime, not to strangle, to hide. The inspector frowned. Explain. Marple looked at Helen. You carried the hollow book. You hid the letter. You lied about her name. Not to kill, but to bury shame. Your silence fed her death. Helen trembled. Tears spilled. I wanted to protect myself, protect our family. I feared exposure more than anything. But I didn't kill her. I swear it. The colonel spat bitterly. She pushed too far. She taunted. I lost my temper. But I would not have been cornered if you had spoken truth earlier. Helen lowered her head. I share blame, not guilt. The inspector wrote fast. Complicity noted. Primary killer, Colonel. Secondary Helen, for concealment. Marianne sobbed quietly. Her scarf lay on the table. Frayed. Torn. She whispered, Why drag me in? I was only a servant. Marple's gaze turned to her. You lied about the scarf. You patched it in haste. You hid its damage. Fear makes liars, not killers, but your fear delayed truth. Michael looked pale. He cleared his throat weakly. And me? I only carried papers. Marple studied him. You wrote her name. Crossed it out. Not guilt. But you feared being linked. Fear again. Guilt by silence. The inspector closed his notebook. All tangled, yet the rope lies on one man's neck. The guards tightened the bindings. The colonel did not resist. His eyes stayed hard. I accept it. Pride stands even in chains. Helen turned away, sobbing. Marianne clutched her suitcase. Michael buried his face in his papers. The inspector sighed. Miss Marple, your logic solved what force could not. She shook her head gently. Logic only untangles. But human pride, fear, and shame wove the knot. The train slowed. Station lights flickered through the window. The guard's voice rang out. York approaching. The inspector rose. Justice will board here. We'll deliver him to the law. The guards pulled the colonel to his feet. He walked stiff, unbowed, chains rattling with each step. Helen whispered, I'll live with this shadow forever. Marple answered softly. Shadows fade, but habits remain. Pride kills. Lies wound. Secrets choke. Marianne asked timidly, Will it end now, miss? Marple looked at the frayed scarf once more. Her eyes lingered, her voice quiet. No, threads travel further than we think. She tucked her knitting away. The red wool rolled loose, then stopped at her shoe. The inspector frowned. Something unsettles you still? Marple nodded faintly. One detail. The ticket stub. Torn too clean. Someone else handled it. Someone not yet named. Silence. Cold. Heavy. The train screeched into the station. Doors clattered open. Steps thundered on the platform. Marple's words hung in the air. One more truth waits, and it will not stay hidden long.